This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the ultimate all-in-one platform to help you design your own personal, professional-looking website. DreamWorks Animation is sort of infamous for their mixed bag selection of films. Some are all-time masterpieces, and others are some of the worst animated movies you've ever seen. But mixed in amongst these are several films which seem to have been forgotten almost altogether. And for some of these forgotten films, which are actually quite good, that is a huge shame. I'm sure anyone who has clicked this video already knows where I'm going with this. Rise of the Guardians is one of these films. And it's not just good, it's really good. I'd say this movie is just barely a masterpiece, or at worst, a near masterpiece. It sets out to tell a unique story filled with heart and passion, and exceeds what you would expect, especially considering how out there the idea is. And speaking of out there ideas, that leads me to my first point, and one of the main reasons I really like this movie, is that it is because it is quite simply not like any other movie I have ever seen. The only way I could possibly describe this movie is as a fantasy epic set in modern day, starring mythical characters who function as an Avengers-style superhero team. From that description, you would probably think this movie would be a disaster, and yet somehow it is exactly the opposite of that. One of the first things that actually makes this movie work is its world building. You might think that just because it's set in modern day, there wouldn't be much world building to do. But no, this movie has a way more world building than you could possibly imagine. Firstly, the locations are vast and intricately designed to match their specific Guardian's style and craft. And not just the generic look you usually get for characters like Santa or the Easter Bunny. I like how different the designs for each of the Guardians and their locations and associated helpers are, yet stylistically, they all match in a cohesive world that feels connected. There's also backstory and lore as to why the characters are here and how they came to be, and not just that they've always existed mysteriously. I especially like the backstory of Pitch, and how he was originally there spreading darkness and fear before any of the Guardians came, which not only makes it clear why they exist here in this world, to defend the hopes and dreams of children from darkness and fear, and it also sets up Pitch really well as a villain, so that you could see his perspective on wanting to get rid of the Guardians because they ruined his perfect world that he had control over. And of course, there's also Jack Frost's backstory as well, which I'll get into more later. Now, if only I had a way to world build my own website to the same quality that the world builders have crafted this movie. Yep, that's right, my friends, it's time to talk about Squarespace. Squarespace is the ultimate tool to help you design your own professional-looking website. It's jam-packed with tons of features, and its simple editing and drag-and-drop interface make it super easy and fun to use. You can either start fresh and build a page from the ground up, or you can use one of Squarespace's many built-in templates, which can speed up the process and give your site a sleek, professional look. Squarespace is also a great way to help you run your own personal business, using web pages to show off your portfolio, or even run your own personal merchandise shop, which is once again super easy to set up, and it'll make selling your products a complete breeze. So make sure to get your hands on this ultimate web design tool, and head over to squarespace.com to start your free trial. And when you're ready, go to squarespace.com/Rockotar to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And a massive thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. But of course, great world building is nothing without great characters. So it's a good thing this movie does that right as well. Each of the Guardians have distinct and likable personalities, and I like that none of them are just the most basic stereotypical portrayals of their given mythical figures. Like, Santa is this big rough and tough Russian swordsmaster, but still with that heart of gold underneath. The Easter Bunny is Australian, loves to toss boomerangs around, and travels using Toontown portals. The Tooth Fairy is, I guess, a hummingbird now, but that's definitely not what you would expect. But they still pull it off even though it's such a unique concept, and it really fits her fluttering, lighthearted, eager personality. I suppose Sandman is fairly close to what you might expect, but he also isn't the kind of character you usually see in movies. Both in terms of that you don't usually see Sandman as a character in movies, and you don't usually see the kind of character that Sandman is in a movie. He is also mute, which both fits his character in that he represents dreams, and all of that is in one's head while sleeping, so being silent matches the general silence of sleep, in a sort of convoluted way. It also allows him to have the cool gimmick of speaking with his thoughts visualized by his sand dreams. And also, it's neat to see a mute character in a movie like this, since mute people are a very underrepresented demographic in film. A perfect example of how well all these characters work is when Jack is first summoned to the North Pole. We see how jolly yet serious Santa is. We get a look at the joking but somewhat insecure sides of the Easter Bunny, and we see how insatiously curious and friendly Tooth Fairy is, as well as having the lovable but less pronounced Sandman, who is cheerful yet cautious. The way the characters work as a team is also great too, since they have the rare but perfect balance of rivalry and occasional bickering, while still standing by each other as true comrades who care. Well, all except one. Jack Frost, at least for the first half of the movie, is much less in the gang than everyone else, even declaring himself a third party when first meeting Pitch. And this is because he has failed to find his true purpose in life. I like that Jack's search for purpose isn't clear to him because he is too focused on himself, and the only way that he can find his purpose is to put the needs and desires of others above himself. He likes to help people have fun, but he does so not just for their sake, but also his own, because of how desperately he wants to be acknowledged. When in reality, being seen or recognized is not as important as what you can give to someone else. And Jack cannot understand this because all he has ever known is a world separated from reality. A fact with both in-universe and metaphorical meaning. Oh wait, I almost forgot to mention a few other characters, specifically the minion rip-off elves. Yes, they are the worst part of this movie, but they are also not really in it that much, and they're not as bad as the minions are at their worst. And I'm only bringing this up because if I don't, I know someone else is going to be in the comments and be like, how can you call this movie a masterpiece when it has the minion rip-off elves? Listen, it's possible for a movie to still be a masterpiece while also having a few minor flaws. And trust me, these minion rip-off elves are not a big problem. Anyways, back to what I was just saying. I probably ruined some great transition by adding this part. Thanks, minion elves. I would also like to take a look at the main villain of this film, Pitch, aka the Boogieman. Upon my most recent rewatch of this movie, I found that he is actually now one of my favorite parts of the film. I really like how creepy he is. The design team has done an excellent job on making him dark and ominous. This is only enhanced by the great voice acting by Jude Law and the superb directing, which often places him in very intimidating positions against dramatic backdrops. And I absolutely love all the shots of him appearing as a shadow, especially this one of Jack in his lair with all the shadows completely surrounding and encircling him. However, I have heard many people criticize Pitch. They say he's a generic and boring, just evil for the sake of it kind of villain. And in a way, they are right, but only in that he is evil for the sake of it, and that is exactly the point the movie is trying to make. I honestly believe Pitch is a deeper character than people think, not necessarily in his personality, but what he represents. Not that I dislike his personality. I'm happy to see a villain just be villainous and not some 17-dimensional tragic character who is actually right and the heroes are the true villains, or something like that. But anyway, you see, Pitch is a representation of people who have no faith, hope, or positivity. People who put themselves above everyone else by pushing others down, all just because they can't stand that people don't like them, even though it's their own fault that people don't like them in the first place. He has twisted the situation to make people believe his way is best, a world of pessimism and negativity.
If enough kids stop believing, everything your friends protect, wonder, hopes and dreams, it all goes away.
Don't be such a pessimist.
You know all those people who tell you to stop believing in things, whether they are fantastical ideas or just personal dreams? Pitch is a representation of those people, and he is the polar opposite of what the Guardians are supposed to be. However, Pitch has gained the advantage because of the fact that the Guardians are no longer directly opposing his worldview. As it is slowly made clear across the movie, the Guardians have become so focused on being efficient and optimal in their operations that they have started to forget their roots, the reason they do all this in the first place. They say they care about the children, but they have completely lost touch with the children because it is just a job to them now.
We are very busy bringing joy to children. We don't have time for children.
It's like when someone in your family buys you a birthday or Christmas present out of obligation and not because they actually care. It's this mindset that has led Pitch to gaining the advantage, since the way he sees the world is under the lens of fear and how it pushes people to think the way they do. And now, the Guardians have started to act more fearfully whether they realize it or not. The simple act of trying to be so efficient and perfect all the time is motivated by fear of not being good enough or letting someone else down. But no one can ever truly be perfect, and Pitch is using their flawed perspective to his advantage. It is easy to let fear spread if you spend too long trying to fix every problem perfectly, instead of just doing your best in any given situation. Since the more effort you put into something, the more that effort is worth if something goes wrong, and that is effort you won't have been able to put elsewhere. The Guardians are so focused on undoing Pitch's actions that they don't even consider why they are even doing what they are doing. For example, completely forgetting to give gifts to the children that they collected teeth from. It's also very telling that while they collect teeth and deliver their gifts, they are so eager to outdo each other, the children are the last thing on their mind. And ultimately, they must pay for their lack of vision, as Pitch makes his biggest move yet and removes Sandman from the chessboard. Sandman was always the biggest threat to Pitch because of how he represents the hopes and dreams of all the children of the world. Killing the source of hopes and dreams and replacing them with fears will lead to a world where he has more power. Pitch is a villain who gains his powers not inherently, but through others. Fear is only a weakness if you let it stop you from achieving your dreams or becoming the best version of yourself. Pitch knows this and wants to make the world like him, eternally pessimistic, so that he can always control how people act and what they believe in. But because he has no power if people see through his illusion, he needs a backup plan. And his plan is to manipulate Jack to joining him by pretending to be his friend. I like it when villains play smart, by not outright opposing the main character, but actively trying to make them work to their advantage. This also has themes connected to reality, how people who often spew hate and negativity pretend to be the good guys because they just want control, and they can only get that by convincing people that their negative opinions on everything are the only correct way to see things. Of course, this mindset is extremely toxic and bad for mental health, and Jack also knows this despite how lost he is. Also, I love how creepy Pitch's lair is, and how it is a dark hole beneath a broken old bed. It takes the often mocked idea of the monster under your bed, and actually makes a very creepy scene out of it. One thing that also works well for Pitch's manipulation, and for Jack's character, is how Pitch hopes the failure of the Guardians at Easter, and their blaming of Jack for everything going wrong, will lead to Jack being more willing to join him instead. And I also like that despite the Guardians turning on him, Jack still holds that they are in the right.
We can make them believe. We'll give them a world where everything is
Pitch black?
And Jack Frost, too.
They'll believe in both of us. No, they'll fear both of us. And that's not what I want.
Showing that he isn't an emotionally manipulatable fool.
I may be eccentric, but I am not
a sicko!
Unfortunately, that doesn't make him perfect, as it still was his fault, and Pitch still gets the better of him, or at least he thinks that in this moment. This ultimately leads to Jack having his hero's darkest moment. He finally gets what he wants, but it all seems so pointless now that Pitch has made so many people lose faith in the Guardians, and he has let them down as a friend. But at last, seeing who he once was, before he died and was reborn as Jack Frost, shows him what he needs to know to find out who he really is and what he was meant to do. He always thought he needed to be recognized for doing all these things, but it was never about being recognized all those years ago. It was being selfless and putting the needs of his sister before his own, sacrificing himself to save her. And now, when the Guardians don't know what to do, their power's gone from lack of belief. Jack saves them by helping the one Guardian most critical of himself, the Easter Bunny. I like how Jack does this simply by caring about the Easter Bunny, and how he would feel by not being believed in. Just like himself. He only gets recognized for the first time when he does an act of kindness for someone else, expecting nothing in return, and it is extra potent because of it being the person who most disliked him so far. Additionally, I love how the Easter Bunny is shown when he loses his powers. He acts all tough, but deep down he is insecure about many things, and his insecurities are shown through his fluffy bunny form, since he is afraid of not being seen as cool like the other Guardians, and hides his softer, more fluffy side, so to speak, by acting tough. But really, he's just a lovable, cute bunny who just wants fun and happiness for the kids around the world. Jack helps people by reminding them to always stay cheerful and filled with hope no matter what happens, to always see the positivity in the world. It is why he was chosen by the Man in the Moon, because he is the opposite of someone like Pitch, and is the key to reminding the Guardians of what is important and rallying them against Pitch. And speaking of rallying against Pitch, the final battle of the movie now takes place, and it is okay. Not my personal favorite part of the movie, but a decent wrap-up all things considered. This is also the moment in which Sandman returns. You could say his return makes his supposed earlier demise a fake-out death, and you would probably be right. But I will actually defend this fake-out death for once, even though I normally despise the trope. You see, Sandman's demise is thematic of Pitch crushing the dreams of people around the world. And without dreams, no one has a reason to care. It is why things go downhill so quickly for the Guardians after he defeats Sandman. And even though the Guardians do take the time to mourn his loss, the movie doesn't dwell on it. And instead, the characters look to the future, to carry on even when he isn't here, in quite an inspiring way. And when Sandman does come back, I don't mind, because it is also symbolic of how you can never truly crush a dream. Not one that someone strongly believes in, only suppress it temporarily. Furthermore, Sandman is a mythical, magical figure. How would one kill him anyway? Plus, he was only seemingly destroyed by his own powers being corrupted against him. But as soon as Pitch starts to lose his control, Sandman simply rises again from the corruption, suppressed but not destroyed. And at last, Pitch is defeated, by everyone proving his lies are false and choosing not to believe in his fake power and influence. For he is nothing more than meaningless shadows pretending to be a threat. If you think about it, what was he even doing the entire time that was so dangerous? Sure, he was sabotaging the Guardians' efforts to bring their joy and happiness to kids around the world, but what was he gonna do after that? He never really had as much power as he wanted people to think he did, and other than being a minor nuisance, he isn't a truly real threat. And one of the things I love about why Pitch fails is because he is fighting for nothing except self-justification. As I mentioned, the problem he has created is quite literally not real. It can be defeated instantly by the characters choosing to not believe in it. I love this specifically because of how it relates to the themes of Pitch, to people who make mountains out of molehills, people who claim there are so many issues and problems in this world and only spread continuous negativity about things that were never problems in the first place. Most anti-woke YouTube channels. And how they only get their power through people believing in the lies they tell. It makes them feel good to have influence, and they will do and say anything to stir people up. They always say it's for a good cause, but in reality, it is only for themselves. As soon as we start thinking for ourselves and stop buying into what others want us to believe, they become meaningless specks which we forget about. And with all that, I honestly believe this movie to be one of DreamWorks' greatest films, which deserves far more recognition for its clever and thought-provoking writing and surprisingly great world building. Maybe, hopefully, one day this movie will get the respect that it deserves. Well, that's my take on this movie anyway. I'd love to know what other DreamWorks movies you guys would be interested in seeing me review in the comments down below, or even possibly a ranking of all the DreamWorks movies, as I'd definitely be interested in doing that as well. I also have to give a massive shout out to those extra special people out there who help support me on another level, my patrons and channel members. It's people like this that help motivate me to keep making videos as I do. I also make gaming content on a gaming channel that I sometimes upload to whenever I have enough free time to edit those videos, as well as several other social media platforms that you can find me on, links in the description down below. If you're ready to head off to another video on this YouTube platform, then why don't you check out my previous DreamWorks review if you missed it, on Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and why I think it is one of the greatest animated movies ever made. Or for something totally different, you could check out my previous upload, where I attempt to defend Attack of the Clones, but most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.